Yeah. My favorite line was, "We have dogs. Dogs are real."
Yep.
Like, greetings, nerds. This is Cena Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Paul. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well. Hope you're doing well, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm doing well after the long weekend and
Yeah.
holiday madness. So let the
Yeah.
games begin.
Yeah. Home stretch. Yeah. Here we are in almost just a couple days to December 1st.
I keep thinking it's December. I've
Yeah.
spent all day today thinking it, and I'm like, no, we actually, that's at the end of this week that we
Yeah.
finally turn into that last month. But yeah, and it's still like it, Christmas, it's coming, but
Hmm.
it's always that weird time when you go back to work after Thanksgiving and then you look at the calendar and you're like, it's another 4 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another, it's just this funny thing of it's like it's not, it feels, I know it always, it goes quicker
Mhm.
than you realize, but at the same time I was like going back and like, oh, where was it 4 weeks ago? Build up to Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Oh
For, for
man.
real. For real. But at least, but now it makes sense to hear like Christmas music because I've always had, for me, Thanksgiving has always been like that. Before Thanksgiving, no Christmas music, none of that stuff. After Thanksgiving, you feel free to like let it go because you got Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Giving Tuesday. So, now I think at least if I ruled the world, that would be my rule.
Well, I'm sure you'd have plenty of followers with that
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
All right. So you put some news on here. So why don't you tell us who got cast or the latest casting in Superman Legacy?
yeah. So right before the holiday, we got our Jimmy Olsen and Eve Teschmacher cast in Superman Legacy. Skylar Gisgondo, who was in Righteous Gemstones. Not very familiar with his work, but when you look at his photo, the guy is like Jimmy Olsen, like he just stepped out of a comic book. I mean, he really, really looks like, when I think of Jimmy Olsen, uh, he matches it to a T. So that was one of the characters that was cast. And then Eve Teschmacher, who is played by Sarah Sampino, Sampaio, I believe. She's Portuguese and she's a model, does a lot of Victoria's Secret work, and I guess has done a lot of acting in Portugal, so or maybe Brazil. I can't remember if she was either Brazil or Portugal, but yeah, that's her backstory. But I know she is a model and has done some work in Victoria's Secret. So and Eve Teschmacher, of course, was one of the characters from the Richard Donner Superman films back in the Superman the movie and Superman 2, if I recall, with Gene Hackman and Christopher Reeve. So, and we've seen her in other iterations too. So, those were the two casting things. And I know James Gunn, of course, he went to Threads and made it very clear to folks that, any rumors you see out there, he's like, just they'll believe them at all because he made it very clear that he doesn't cast first and then write story. He writes story first and then he goes to casting. So, and we know how well he is as far as a casting director. So, um, yeah. So that was some of the other things that just sort of happened over the holidays from as it relates to Superman Legacy. And
So what's going on with Marvel? Because you also had casting news for Fantastic Four.
yeah, now this is just a rumor, but this is from Daniel RPK. He is a scooper, but has a pretty good track record uh, on these types of things. He did break the news about Pedro Pascal being considered for the role, even though Jeff Snyder also had it as far as another scooper, but Jeff didn't have. I guess his source was still kind of squishy, whereas Daniel just ran with it. But he, uh, this scooper, had put the rumor out there that Anya Taylor-Joy, I guess from the Queen's Gambit and several other things, also was also New Mutants, is rumored to be playing the Silver Surfer in Fantastic Four.
Oh my God! Remember when New Mutants was a thing?
I know.
That was technically pre-pandemic, right? They started the trailers and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah, or was it the first? Yeah, either the pandemic hit or was it one of the first things to get released right after? It all runs into a big blur.
Well, I know it was one of the first things to get released right after.
Yeah.
But I do vaguely remember watching like promotions, quote unquote, during whatever that Comic-Con or DC thing was. It wasn't the DC Dome.
Yeah, Comic-Con at home, yeah.
Yeah, Comic-Con at home. Like one of the few things of interest.
Yeah.
Like it had a shining, and then 20 months later it got released and no one's talked about it until now.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Man, that brings back a lot of memories.
It does. But yeah, that's the rumor that she, and of course, Silver Surfer is, it would be a gender swap, which of course a lot of the, the peanut gallery on Twitter, of course, always grumbles whenever these kind of things happen. But if that is indeed the case with the casting here, but yeah, I mean, we do understand that Galactus is going to show up in Fantastic Four, and of course, Silver Surfer is one of Galactus's heralds. So we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, and that is it for casting news. But before we completely step away from Marvel, it looks like Loki first season's showrunner and Multiverse of Madness writer Michael Warden has been hired to write Avengers: The Kang Dynasty. That is fascinating that he wrote both of those things.
Yeah. So yeah, because he was the writer for Loki season 1, but then he got called away to do Multiverse of Madness. So actually, the showrunner for season 2 of Loki and writer for Loki, Eric Martin, actually ended up, because of the pandemic and stuff, had to do a lot of rewrites to the initial treatment for the show.
Yeah.
So, and based judgment off of what we got with Multiverse of Madness versus Loki, I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. But the bigger thing is with this news is, of course, Daniel Crichton had stepped away from directing the Avengers Kang Dynasty. And so, questions, everybody was like, well, is Kang Dynasty going to not happen now? Is it going to be, especially with all the stuff with, how Loki season 2 ended, and of course all the stuff going on with Jonathan Majors, but looks like Kang Dynasty is still going, and Michael Waldron is going to write it, and he's also writing the part 2. I guess, well, I won't say part 2, but I guess Avengers Secret Wars, which will be the second Avengers movie where they're doing the back-to-back releases with the 2 films here, and at least currently slated for 2026 and 2027.
All right, that is it for Marvel and DC news. Before we get into the shows, we have heard that Amazon is developing a Spanish language spinoff of The Boys set in Mexico City, because why the fuck not?
Exactly. Yeah, that broke today. I saw it on all the trades, Variety, Deadline, etc. And again, it's just a development, but Diego Luna, and of course we know him from, of course, Andor and other shows, and Gael Garcia Bernal are slated to possibly produce this. Gael was played the lead character in Werewolf by Night in the Marvel special presentations, if folks are wondering who he is. Yeah, that was some news that broke today, and we shall see what happens, because like you said, why the hell not? Go for it.
Uh, do what you gotta do to make some money in this day and age. That's all I
Yeah.
have to say.
Yeah.
All right. So after I don't know how many months, we have resumed Doom Patrol Season 4, Episode 7, Orqwith Patrol. And I watched the full thing. I didn't come out of it as mad as I thought I would be.
Mhm.
Like, granted, I had low expectations. So I was like, this isn't that bad. And I'm actually surprised because I vaguely figured out during the episode what was going on and where we left off.
Mhm.
So it wasn't horrible. That being said, I did spend a considerable amount of time also thinking, why the heck did they choose this episode to like, okay, now we're going to break?
Yeah.
It's just so weird because it felt very much like a part 2 of the one that we watched previously, episode 6.
Yeah.
So that being said, because of how it was written, like I said, I didn't really spend too much time being like, okay, I have no idea what they're talking about. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt the same way. And I know, like, I want to say that whenever this part 2 of 4B dropped, I think episodes 7 and 8 aired back to back. So maybe if watching these two back, but we'll see what happens at episode 8. But maybe when we do, maybe we'll be next week. We'll be like, oh, now these two make sense. But I agree with you that yeah, it did. All the bigger pieces that I remember, like of course them losing their immortality and being stuck in this Orqwith dimension and all that kind of stuff. I mean, and Rita and Madame Rouge being in the ant farm, all those pieces, they quickly came back. But yeah, it was a very like odd episode to sort of get back into the thing, but but it was also very like Doom Patrol in a way. Is the things I remember why this show really works well when they really start exploring some of the character issue exploration of things like Cliff and also like why and then Derek like thinking that these are all superheroes and why the fuck are we thinking these guys could ever like do anything right. So you had those little elements of it too, but yeah, but it was an okay return. Like I said, I was like you where I had very low expectations and I was almost ready to like just bail on it like you did with Mr. Robot, but I didn't.
Mhm. You just had to bring up Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
I feel like you remember that more than I do because I only think about it whenever you bring it up, like offhandedly, and then I
Yeah.
quickly forget.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing.
Well, it was such I can't of shows that we watched, there's certain ones that just like stick out, and that was one that where especially where you really like. I think whenever we first met, that was the one you're telling me I had to watch, so it always like sticks with me.
Oh yeah, I was obsessed with that show for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah,
It's pretty much what got me into podcasting.
yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah,
there was something about the way that last season was going where I'm like, honestly, I don't want to see how this ends. I
yeah,
just don't
yeah,
care. I don't like what's happening right now. And so I'm going to keep the memory of this show the way I want to without letting an ending like ruin anything for me.
yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, and that's how like I said, with Doom Patrol, I've been holding on to that first season and even the second season, and so I was already kind of. I will say the show definitely has started. It is started to show the limits of what they can do with these characters, and I know
Yeah.
we had mentioned that before, and really being away from it for like 9 months and then coming back to it really showed. Yeah, it's
Well,
probably ending at a
I
good time.
Yeah, it's just the writing is so simple And Cliff is always going to be told, don't do this, don't touch this, and then he's going to touch it.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen because, and to an extent, I can appreciate how even after like 4 arguably short seasons and one with a major gap in airing, how we can still come back to it and we know exactly who these characters are because yes, their storylines have gotten very repetitious, but we know what drives them. We understand why Cliff touches it even though he's told not to, why he gives up his what are they calling it? I kept writing in my notes immortality, and then I'm like, no, they keep saying longevity. It's the longevity. It's so stupid. But we know why he volunteers for that based on everything we've seen leading up to it. So to an extent, I have to give it to the writers where there are other shows that I think are better written, but sometimes the characters make decisions and I'm like, where did that come from? It came out of left field.
Right.
And in a way, and it still feels like a family. It feels like, okay, all of these characters are learning this lesson about how the thing, like their biggest flaw or what they what they believe is their curse, it also makes them who they are. And at the end of the day, they're not going to want to give that up, despite how much better their quote unquote life will be or worse it'll be. But yeah, they've definitely reached their limitations for how to keep viewers interested. But then again, we're going to finish up this season.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that point up about the characters and doing things consistent with the characters. And even though we know we know what's going to come on, but I think that is, I know you said there's some show that may be better written. There may be some things maybe better written as far as plot wise, but I think as far as character wise and as far as just how, again, with this big gap in this show, we know these characters, and I think there is that element of family, not only the family that the Doom Patrol within the universe, but also us as fans and as viewers, we've come to embrace and love these characters as well. So that even after this break, we sort of slide right back in with the craziness and the insanity of this bunch, and it is fun to watch, and I did have some laugh out loud moments, and did have those good feelings again about why. Whereas I was like, as we were leading up to watching these last, group of episodes in 4B, I was kind of iffy about it. But now I'm like, okay, I'm back on board. I'm ready to see where this goes.
Yeah, I did have 2 curveballs thrown at me. And that was when Casey showed up because I was at first thinking, who the fuck are you? Why do these characters know you? And then I remembered the episode from the previous season. I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if it happened.
It was 4B. It was 4A. Yeah, it was 4A. It was Space Case.
It was in 4A that we were okay.
Yep.
So that feels like an entirely different season.
Yeah, it was literally last year. I think it was like end of 2022 when we watched Space Case because.
Man, the fact that you know that.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, like, who the fuck is Isabel Feathers?
So it all comes full circle. So she was the actress who played Rita in remember how they had the production of Our Town? Like, well, you know what happened in.
Right. There was the production. Rita couldn't do it.
Right. And and so Isabella was whenever Madame Rouge with the big time machine showed up, she was the one that fell into the crater.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, I remember Our Town, and I remember reading the whole acting stuff go on. I don't really remember someone falling into the crater, but that makes sense. So interesting. I mean, I figured with the response, it had to be someone. I just
Yeah,
didn't have that
yeah,
much memory to put those pieces together, but that is why I raised the question.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting with like with the mortis because it's like and maybe this is a head fake but that maybe a mortis is something more that's out there, but or it could just be Isabella Feathers. I given the way this show works, it probably is. This is probably a mortis.
Yeah, it could be, but there's still that rabbit running around.
Yeah,
They always like show, and I'm always thinking you're gonna be the ultimate bad guy. I just know it the way this show works. It's gonna be a rabbit, okay?
yeah, or peanut butter to fart and donkey.
Or that. I don't really have anything else to say about Doom Patrol.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, Yeah. I mean, I really don't have much more to say either. I mean, other than it really brought us back. I mean, there's the the funny bits, with Rita and Madame Rouge. I mean, this is. I still, I'm still. I did have to. Overall, I'm still kind of like about Madame Rouge, but I did have to laugh whenever she talked about how they with the whole beaver and toothbrush, and whenever she and Rita were drunk. I mean, that was a pretty funny scene. But yeah, beyond that, I mean, I think like it was just got us sort of reoriented for the start of the 4B, and then we'll just sort of see where things go until episode 12.
that we will. Now we get back into our Invincible season 2 discussion with the middle episodes, because it will. So correct me if I'm wrong, Will.
Mhm.
Next week we'll watch the 4th episode, and then it goes on break.
That is correct. It goes on break until some point early next year, according to Robert Kirkman. He just basically is like, let's just take the holidays off. So to sort of like our getting back to our Arrowverse days when we used to have to wait with the cliffhanger at the in December.
Well, let's hope it's a good cliffhanger.
Yeah,
Considering we already have Mark arriving on the planet where his dad is waiting, so
yeah,
we
yeah,
already got that.
yeah,
But apparently, it does get pretty crazy, and that's in the 4th episode. So we shall see.
yeah.
Um,
That's what I've heard. I have not watched ahead, but but just seeing the photos on the internet.
I have not seen anything. What are your thoughts on the 2nd episode?
So, I thought about what you said, and I went back and actually I listened to our discussions of season one, and the very thing that you mentioned last week, and we said it whenever we watched season one, which is this show takes a while to build up. I feel like these two episodes, I just felt like, at least with the second one, it just sort of felt like it was sort of spinning in his wheels a bit. I mean, there was a lot of stuff packed into it. Um, but I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't like, I mean, I'll just be honest. I mean, there were times I started like just doing other stuff because it just didn't engage me. Except for the stuff that happened with Adam Eve and her parents. But,
Yeah, why that?
hmm?
Why Adam Eve and what
um,
with her parents?
because it reminded me a lot of The Boys in the sense that there's consequences of people doing superhero stuff, and she was thinking she was doing a good deed by helping to rebuild the area in Chicago and stuff, and then once we learned at the end of the episode where there was a reason why they didn't develop that area, because that park or whatever was on shaky, and the buildings were on shaky ground, and so there was that piece, and then also Just the, I guess it did help to watch the Adam Eve episode as far as just sort of getting a deeper understanding of family dynamics. I mean, I know we saw it some in the first season with her parents and her dad and everything, but whenever he's like having to swallow his, he's trying to keep up appearances and not wanting to her to know that he's like working at the burger joint and she can like change and think can use her power to change things to a gold apple and stuff like that. I mean, that really drew me in more so than some of the other stuff. Because because quite frankly, when I really like started looking away and just kind of like checking my phone was anytime the Guardians of the Globe showed up. I'm just like, just take them out of the show. It just drives things to a complete halt for me.
Yeah, it definitely feels like, oh, we're watching the C Team all of a sudden. Why are we doing this? What I get there's some connection, but is there? Yeah, I was gonna say similar things about Adam Eve where because you forced me to watch the special, I think I had more appreciation, but at the same time, the more I think about what occurred in this episode, I hope they end up redeeming the father. Because I don't like this idea that he's being put in this like very stereotypical the parent thinks the child is a freak.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they lost their kid at birth and then were given Eve and so there's a lot of mixed emotions and all the dad. I mean, I'm hoping at some point this season there's between Adam and her dad or Adam, Eve and her dad, there's a conversation where we see more of his side because so far between the special and this episode, we're seeing Eve's side, and I did appreciate that he managed to point out where what she sees as doing a good thing actually is more destructive. I wouldn't equate it so much to the boys. No one died necessarily. Granted, I wouldn't put it past these writers to do that. But yeah, I maybe it's because we're coming with Gen V. I know, and I talked about this last week. There's so much of a similarity that I'm just like, okay, I get it. Now it's becoming stereotypical. I get it. Yeah. But yeah, I think I've always turned off my mind while watching this show whenever the Guardians of whatever come up. But I will just be very frank. I could care less about what was going on in Atlantis. And I think as a whole, this episode, especially when we're about to jump into the third episode, it feels like a filler more. We want to give these characters time to breathe. And so the viewers understand, okay, post the disaster in Chicago and Omni-Man going haywire, these are really what like the lives of our characters are doing, getting further away from that event and having some sort of adjustment period occur. And then in the third episode, we're going to throw some really wacky stuff. I did appreciate though how at the end we kind of got a little bit of a tease into Angstrom and kind of like, okay, now that we've distracted you for 35 minutes, here's a continuation of what we started last week for about 5 minutes.
Yeah. I'm glad you. I was thinking that. I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of the things too. Is I guess they're trying to avoid the trope of oh, now we introduced the big bad at the end of, the end credit. Now we're going to jump right into that story. And then, of course, it just becomes another end credit where we see Angstrom, and it's not even in our prime dimension, but it's in an alternate dimension where,
I
Invincible
don't
and Omni-Man were.
I don't think that's what they're trying to avoid. I think that they're doing last season to find out that it was the dad the full time. They had a secret. They had a big reveal for who that big bad was. This time they led up front. Okay, this is your big bad guy, but we really can't. We have to hold back until to have the epic showdown. But we also want to continue it. So I don't know. I don't know.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, that they are, they're definitely saving it for the back half of 2B and have the showdown, and they'll just sort of tease this multiverse that we're in, in Invincible, because that's what we do these days. We do multiverses, but but beyond that, I agree with you. The Atlantis story did feel like filler, and I just felt like they have all these A, B, C, D plots, and it just really didn't go. It just didn't really feel like it went anywhere.
In episode 2?
Yeah.
Oh, I felt like they like tied a bow on each of those plots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was a tie in a bow. I just felt like it just did. I mean, it just felt like a filler episode. I mean, that's what I meant by that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, to me, often with filler episodes, you have these storylines that, well, it's just like step forward.
Yeah. Well, I will say, even though, I mean, I guess there is like the whole, like, with the shapeshifter, I know he's embedded with the Guardians, but I guess they have that there is that story that's sort of that undercurrent there, with underlying story that's probably going to lead into something further down the line that they're setting up, with that, with the Martian. But yes, I mean, so there were some things, but that, well, I'm sure there'll be some payoff down the road. But like I said, I don't know if it was just from this holiday or what, but this second episode just didn't really engage me at all, other than the thing I mentioned about Adam Eve.
Right. All right. So that brings us to Alan the Alien. Because that was this episode, right?
Yeah. I guess the first half of the episode.
Because, and I thought it was genius. I still think it's very genius what they did with Alan the Alien, because I am one of those people who, when I saw the end credits come up, I was like, all right, that was short. And then and why I think it was genius is because, for whatever reason, during that period of time, I had no thought to myself, man, they're not jumping back to Mark.
Yeah.
We haven't seen Mark at all. I was not thinking that. I was just like, okay. Are we gonna, like, I was just like, all right, we're gonna get through this weird intro, and then next thing I know, it took a dark turn, and there's bloodshed in space, and I at first, I will not lie, when the older lady pulled Alan out, or when they came and Alan ended up in space and getting beat up, I was thinking it was the council for some reason. And then I was like, no, it's Villamites, and who have Seek, because Alan found out about Mark and what happened on that planet, and which could be a big weakness, because Villamites never turn on each other. They never fight each other. And that was all of pretty much all of the season finale from last year, or for previously. So I like that. I like how it's interesting to me how with this, I don't know what you want to call it, this little excerpt, this side story that we only got in this episode. Who knows what we'll get down the line, but it still continued the themes of the Vitramites are very evil. And the fact that what occurred in our Mark's life was very different from other dimensions and what occurs in elsewhere in this galaxy. So I really enjoyed the first 20 minutes of this episode, or however long it was. Yeah. I'm kind of mad that it continued just because I really appreciated a short episode.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have to agree. I whenever the credits rolled and I was like, huh, that was short, but yeah, I mean, just getting Alan's backstory and yeah, and I like the way they set it up too, as far as just the parallels between Mark and Alan. At least Mark going off to college and moving into his dorm, and the romance between Mark and Amber, and then Alan and his girlfriend, and and all that. So so we had this little so we did get a little bit of Mark at the beginning, but once we like you said, once we cut to, I think they jokingly went back to Mark, and they're like, oh wait, they're having sex. Okay, we'll go back to Alan. Oh, they're having sex. Okay, let's figure out how we're going to transition here. But yeah, but once I did get the full story of Alan, yeah, they really Seth Rogen. I just always enjoyed that character. Of course, and the whole running joke with Uroth and getting him mixed up with Earth. But and of course, because of that, he accidentally finds out about Mark. That which then of course leads to his own maybe demise, but also how even with with Alan's government and stuff, they're trying to seek out the mole. So I mean, there were a lot of things that were going on in that episode that I did, that unlike the second episode, I felt this one definitely felt clearly where they were moving things forward, not only about Alan, but of course, when we do get past the back half of the episode with what was going on with Mark as well.
Yeah. What about Spouses of Superhero Support Group with Debbie?
Yeah, that was that was another thing that this episode I thought did really, really well, and just how and how I know we didn't talk much about Debbie and Cecil in episode 2 as far as who's in command as far as Mark and all, but just overall with her this season, just how alone she is and having to deal with this, and I know Olga shared with her the support group, and as long as she kept her mouth shut about if she just kept the cover story that Nolan was just a victim of Omni-Man, things probably would have turned out differently. But then how it did turn out, and then how the guy was like, you're not welcome here. I mean, it was just I will say it was pretty much a pretty big gut punch for what Debbie's going through, and how alone she is dealing with all this.
Yeah. There's something about the way they're playing Debbie's storyline where I did have a thought after watching this episode that she may have a big part in why the Mark we know made the decision he did. So because we saw them, Nolan and her, as a couple for a majority of season 1, and how much love there was. So I don't know. I would hope that they're able to incorporate her somehow, because they are doing a very good job of showing how she is a victim herself in all of this
Yeah.
whole situation. Granted, she's also dealing with still raising Mark,
Mm.
and I do appreciate that they haven't shown a side, or at least that I've seen, where she fears Mark becoming his father.
Yeah. I haven't seen it either. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which none would, because that's a little bit cliche.
Yeah. Yeah. It would
I
be.
want her to like be the one to be like, no, 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 no. He's not Nolan's son, he's my son.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So so
Yeah.
that's why he's good. He's half. Um so I'll see. We'll see where that goes with Debbie. Um, all right, what else? We had a run-in with Sam's dog, who wasn't really Sam's dog. That was weird.
Yeah. Is it Science Dog or Science Dog?
You know, I heard Seance dog. It's
Okay.
probably Science dog, but I could have sworn they said Seance.
Yeah. I just know. Yeah. It's funny just thinking about Mark, and and I love the way that they were like, okay, Mark, you're going off to college now. And Mark was holding on to, he was with his roommate. He was like, these aren't toys, these are collectibles. And reminds us that Mark is still a kid in a lot of ways. I mean, yes, he's 17. He's 17, and even though he's seen a lot and have experienced a lot in the last, I guess, year or so of his life, he's still a kid. And I guess those little things like that were nice um, little in-story reminders that where he is. And then of course the Thraxon using that, showing up as Science Dog or Seance Dog, um, to get Mark to help them, and of course Mark, showing some of that superhero skepticism, maturity that like whenever he was like, wait a minute, tell me what's going on here, really, or about or we're gonna kick your ass. But yeah, so I did like that aspect of the story, and also that whole dynamic between Mark and Cecil too, as far as to your point about Debbie, not having the cliche, thing with Omni-Man, but but I guess Cecil's playing that role of like worry that Mark is going to turn out like Nolan. So I guess you already have that one character in the show that has that feeling. So I don't, maybe it would be too much to have too many people having that worry that Mark's going to turn out just like Omni-Man.
Right, right. Yeah, my favorite line was, "We have dogs. Dogs are real."
Yep.
Like, we have dogs. Dogs are real. It just was like, okay, okay, very cool. So what were your thoughts at the very end, when it turned out that it was, Science Dog was not real? See, Science Dog, it's too cliche. Like
Yeah.
Seance Dog, that's a bit menacing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, even though the dog wasn't wearing like a witch hat, I still, in my mind, it's going to be Seance Dog.
Okay.
Okay. I don't care if they call them Science Dog. That's like for babies.
Well,
Science.
I think that was the point with Mark.
Okay, it's the point, but come on.
I
Come
like
on.
I like
Did you not
I,
watch 20 minutes beforehand when they ripped Alan to shreds on in the show? Like, and then you're gonna be like, oh, Science Dog. What the fuck? Oh God, a lot of mixed messages. But yeah,
oh,
the dad.
totally. Yeah. So I yeah, well, so when Nolan did show, whenever Omni-Man did show up, um it was, I won't say I would, it tracked. I mean, I wasn't like, oh, I mean, I was, yeah, it didn't throw me. To be honest, it was sort of like, okay, this is happening, and let's see what happens. Let's see where this goes.
But he really was taken to Thraxon, right?
Yeah.
Now, have we heard about Thraxon before this?
I don't recall seeing those folks before in the first season.
Okay.
So yeah.
I don't. I'm curious. I'm more curious to understand why Thraxon and what that relationship is, because it almost, I mean, granted, we just finished watching the show only a few weeks ago, but it almost felt like a Thor movie where Thor returns to what is the place? Asgard.
Asgard, yeah.
Asgard, and Loki's there.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
I think
well,
that was what the inspiration.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it felt like Nolan was it was some kind of ceremony happening, and he was being hailed as ruler, and I don't know, it was weird. So
Yeah.
I'm not so much wanting to for those two to go at it quite yet this early on in the season. I'm more like, why Thraxon? What's going on there? What you've been up to on Thraxon?
Yeah, I did too. I was just like, okay, so you basically found a willing society just to, like, we're not going to fight you. We know what you are. Just come on. You're our ruler.
Yeah. But he had to get his son there for a reason, because something's happening, and it might have to do with the council or the people who tore Alan to shreds at the beginning of the episode. Might be after Mark now.
Yeah. Or Nolan's on to Angstrom. Possibly. I don't know. I haven't read the comics, so I have no idea where this is going. So, yeah.
All right. Well, we shall learn more and probably have another cliffhanger ending to talk about next week with Invincible, and then we're going to go through the next 2 episodes of Doom Patrol. So on that note, Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Will M. Polk, WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me there too at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at Scene and Nerd. Friend us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram and Threads at scene_n_nerd. And visit our website, www.sceneandnerdpodcast.com. But most importantly, rate, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.